All right. So I'm logged into our training application. Of course, all of the information that you're going to see, they are test patients, so no real patient data. So I'm logged in as a care manager, and I am on my care manager dashboard. Um, from my task list, this is probably going to be the most quick and easy way for me to get to a patient's community care plan, which is where we're going to begin. So I'm just going to select one of my patients, and it's going to take me to my community care plan. So I think this is a view that most of you are probably familiar with. My default view is going to be the summary view, where I can see over on the left, I can see the items on my care plan, and on the right, I see a summary view of all of those items, as well as any planned outreaches. You can see if I have a planned outreach, there's a colored bubble over here, which indicates it's color coded based on the time frame. So these are outreaches that were planned for April 20th. A little bit higher on my care plan, I have a planned outreach for this week. So that's our current, from my dashboard on my task list, I can see the dates of my planned outreaches, as well as here on my summary view of my care plan, as well as if I come over here from my care plan drop down and select the calendar view, this is going to give me a view of my planned and performed outreaches in a calendar format, so that I can easily see for each day what I have coming up. So we have a couple different ways to see outreaches that are planned for the future. As well, if I clicked on my all patient CCP calendar up here at the top level, that would take me to a calendar that has all patients that have outreaches planned in the future. So the first thing I wanted to show you is, and I'll just go back to our summary view because this is going to be the default. When I select Outreach Assistant, you'll notice that we have a new table view. So this is what we refer to as outreach history. So we now have a way for the user to have a very quick overview of all planned and performed outreaches. So I can view this in a sort of table format, and it lets me see things that I have coming up in the future, as well as outreaches that have been performed in the past. Also, keep in mind that our existing functionality where we would chart an outreach or plan an outreach remains unchanged. So you still have the ability to go about documenting an outreach and planning an outreach in the same way that you are doing today. But this feature is new, where you'll see that at the top of the page, I have my planned outreaches. We have a little number badge that shows me the number of planned outreaches. We have over on the right, we have a timeline filter. So by default, for our planned outreaches, the system is going to, by default, show things that are planned within the next 3 months. Now, I can change that if I want to see my planned outreaches only within the next 1 month. And you'll see when I click this bubble, the display changes over here. I can also select 1 week to show only those outreaches that are planned within the next week. If I wanted to look at a different time frame, I always have the option to come over here into my date picker and look, for example, if I wanted to look farther back. So if I wanted to look to see all of my planned outreaches that might be overdue from the past, and you see now I've got a couple overdue outreaches that are displayed. So you have a couple different options. I can go with my fixed 1 week, 1 month, or 3 months, or I can set a custom date for displaying the planned outreaches. For example, if I wanted to change this end date to sometime in the future, I could look way ahead to see all of my planned outreaches. And you can see in this case, I have quite a few. So you can use this to filter what it is that you want to see. Now, once I have my filter set as far as what outreaches I want to display, I'm just going to go back to March just so I can see my overdue outreaches. Now from here, I have a couple different options. So each line is going to show me the date of my planned outreach as well as the creator. So this is the user that planned the outreach via Outreach Assistant, or it could have been done on your care plan via the task edit function. So you can see the person who created the outreach, and if I have set within my planned outreach the type, that would be displayed here, as well as the person who I plan to contact. And these fields are optional, so it's not always going to be populated. Now, from here, if I wanted to expand each day, so there's going to be a line for each planned outreach, you can see that I have, for this one, I have multiple tasks. So each of these tasks is displayed as a separate little object. Now I can select as a single, I can select one or more. If I want to perform an outreach, I can select the outreaches that I want to perform, and then I can just click on the perform button up here. Now we have a few different options for selecting, so I just want to go through those. So like I mentioned, I can expand and collapse each individual line to show the task for which the outreach is performed, or I have the ability to expand all. And again, keeping in mind that it's always going to be based on these filters that I have selected at the top. So if I say expand all, it's going to open up each one of these lines, and it's going to display each one of the tasks for which I have an outreach planned. Now, if I've entered a note in my planned outreach, you'll see that there's a little orange bubble. So right here, if I click on that orange bubble, this is going to show me, this is a note that I've included just as an example within my planned outreach. So only if I've captured a note will I have that orange bubble. Otherwise, it'll just appear as this task. So I have quite a few options. I can expand or collapse just depending on how I want to look at the different tasks. I also have the ability to select. I can select all. So when I select all, it's going to select all of the tasks that I have currently displayed. Now, if I don't want to select all, I can deselect as well. So I can toggle between my different options here. I also have the ability to select only those tasks that are assigned to me. This task happens to be assigned to me as a member of the care team. So on your community care plan, you do have the ability to assign that task to an individual care team member. And in this case, I can select only those tasks that are assigned to me. And then I can unselect, and again, I can select individually, or again, I can select only those assigned to me, and then I can select additional ones. So you have a lot of different options as to what outreaches that you're selecting. And what I'm doing right now is I am selecting the outreaches that I want to perform my outreach for. So I'm going to deselect that one. I'm going to actually select my overdue outreaches. And when I expand that, you can see that all of the outreaches for this day and all of the outreaches for this day are now selected, and these are not. Now, when I've selected the outreaches for which I want to perform, I'm going to click on my blue button here. Now, I also have the ability to delete a planned outreach. If I had planned an outreach in error, I also have the ability to delete an outreach in the same way that I'm selecting here. So I'm going to perform. So I'm going to click on the blue perform button, and you'll notice that, and this is the big improvement in my opinion, rather than in the old way where you would select your related tasks from the drop-down, you can see that my outreach assistant has automatically populated with those tasks that I have selected in the previous screen. So that's quite nice. The other thing is for my planned date, the date that's displayed here is the date that your outreach was planned, and I have to make sure that that date is selected here because this is what is going to tell the system to take it off of my task list. So once I perform the outreach, as long as I have that date selected here, it will no longer appear on my task list, on the patient calendar, or on the patient care plan. So it also it's going to default to the date of that overdue outreach. So that's going to populate into the date field. I will simply click on the date field, and if I double click, it's going to populate with today's date, or I can select a date on the calendar. Now I have to fill in my required field. So I'm going to select the type of outreach. This is a phone call, and I'm going to document that I was able to contact the patient. So I'm going to fill in my required fields. I can optionally select who I contacted, whether it's the patient or some other member of the care team, a family member, or someone else. I also am going to optionally record the number of minutes that I have spent under my duration. If I was not successful, I would select not contacted, and then unsuccessful reason would be a required field. But I am going to document this as contacted, and you'll see that this field now becomes disabled. So now I do have the ability to document a individual note at the level of each task or at the general outreach note level, whatever your preference is. If I also decide that I do not want to include one of these tasks, I can simply remove it by clicking the X over here, which is the same as our current functionality. So I am going to perform an outreach for all of those items, and you'll see that when my screen refreshes, and I'm going to just collapse, my planned outreaches are no longer displayed up here. And when I come down to the next section, if I expand this line, you can see that these are the outreaches that I have just performed. So we'll talk about performed outreaches, and these are actually, we should consider these two separate sections. So my planned outreaches, that is the top section that we just went over. Now, if we look down below, we have a different section on performed outreaches. So it's going to have that same badge number to show me the number of outreaches that have been performed, again, within the context of my time frame. So for planned outreaches, we are looking forward. So this time frame is going to look from today up to 3 months or whatever time period I've selected, looking for those planned outreaches. Whereas my performed outreaches, I'm going to look backwards. So I can select whether I want to show those outreaches that were performed within the last week, within the last month, or within the last 3 months. And you'll notice that my display down here changes to show me those outreaches that meet that time frame criteria. Again, I have the ability to adjust the time frames. For example, if I wanted to look back to the beginning of the year, you can see down here at the bottom, I can see my outreach that was performed back in January. So I have the same ability to set whatever specific custom date I might want to look for a date range of the outreaches that have been performed. Now this section, I have the ability to expand or collapse each individual line. And each line is going to show me the date that the outreach was performed, as well as who performed the outreach. So I can see the name of the specific care manager that performed that outreach, the type of outreach, who was contacted, the status, whether it was contacted or not contacted, and the duration that I have recorded for that outreach. So I can expand each individual line so we can see I did not record any notes for this outreach. So it just has the comment that no overall outreach note is recorded. And here are the individual tasks for which I performed an outreach, and each one of those is listed here. If I had notes, they would appear underneath the task. So for example, when I expand the next line down, you can see this is the task, send education documentation, and this is my note. This is my outreach note that I captured when I performed my outreach in Outreach Assistant. And I can have multiple lines expanded at once, or I can do them individually, whatever it is that is going to meet my needs. So you can see for this outreach, there's my outreach note, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to collapse all of these just so I can see everything. Now, you'll notice that I have a checkbox to show deleted. As a care manager, I do not have the ability to delete an outreach, but that is a new feature that as an admin user, if an outreach was performed on the wrong patient or if an outreach was performed in error, an admin user would be able to, from the outreach history, be able to delete that outreach. And it would, if I had outreaches that had been deleted, if I clicked this box, it would show them, and the outreaches and the notes would be shown with strike through text to denote those outreaches that have been deleted. And again, I just want to emphasize that that functionality is reserved for admin users only. So the care manager would have the ability to see deleted outreaches, but would not have the ability to delete any outreaches on their own. So that is, in a nutshell, I think for outreach history, I think that's that. So the next thing that I want to show you is I want to show you goal originated by. So from the outreach, and again, as I mentioned, if I wanted to, so my default landing spot, when I select outreach assistant, it's going to take me to outreach history. But if I select chart outreach instead, you'll notice this is the very familiar outreach assistant screen where I have the ability to perform an outreach in the same way that I can do it today by selecting the specific task from my dropdown and filling in my fields and submitting from here. So that functionality remains the same, as well as planning an outreach. So the functionality for planning an outreach has not changed. I would still do that in the same way that I do today by selecting the specific tasks from my dropdown in Outreach Assistant. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands these are separate. This remains our old functionality. If I wanted to perform an outreach via outreach history, I would select it here and perform. Okay, whereas this is going to just take me directly to my blank outreach assistant screen. So now, if I want to exit this view, I would click on the back button at the upper right of my screen, and that's going to take me back to my care plan summary view, my default view for my care plan. So the next feature is goal originated by, and that is, so if I come down to the goal level, so I've got my care plan, my problem, and then my goal, you'll notice that we have an additional little text here that says originated by. So if I click the edit button for my goal, you'll notice that I have a new field here where it says originated by. When I click in that drop down, I have the ability to select a member of the care team, or I even have the ability to select the patient. So this is a feature that allows the user to designate who was the originator of the goal. So you may have a goal on your care plan that's something that's very specific from the patient. The patient has a goal that they want to attend their daughter's wedding and they want to be able to walk a certain distance or something like that. So we have the ability to attribute a goal to a certain user or the patient. And so when I save that, you'll notice that on my care plan, it shows originated by, and then the patient's name, and then in parentheses, it says patient. Now, I also have the ability, if I go back and edit again, I can change the originator, and I can also add a free text answer. So for example, I could say physical therapist. And when I save that, it automatically will add this extended care team. If I select anyone other than the patient or someone on the care team, it'll automatically assign that extended care team. So that's kind of a nice feature. It is completely optional. It is not mandatory that you capture that, but it just is an extra feature if you want to capture that. Now, I also have the ability to document an assessment right from the assessment screen. So I'm just going to click over here. I have an assessment on my care plan that's in progress. And you can see by the green bubble, I have an outreach planned. So I have a planned outreach to perform this, complete this assessment scheduled for tomorrow. So you'll notice when my assessment is displayed, you'll see that we have this object over here. This is the assessment outreach object. So what this does is it allows the user to complete an outreach while I am in the process of completing the assessment. So if I click edit, I can go through and I can answer my questions, and all the while I am able to capture an outreach by just filling in the fields over here, very much the same as if I were doing it through Outreach Assistant. I can document who I spoke with, and then the planned date. So this is because, again, remember, I had a planned outreach, so I want to select this. So it's going to take that off of my task list and off of the calendar. And you'll notice that the note section is going to be required. So I'm just going to enter a note. And then when I select add, my outreach is recorded. And you'll notice that when I click on this little orange bubble up here, you can see that there is the details of my outreach that I have just performed without ever leaving my assessment screen. So that's kind of a nice new feature. So I'm just going to go and answer a few of these questions, and then I'm going to mark it as complete. And the next feature that I wanted to show you is Assessment Compare. So you'll see over here, if I have more than one instance of an assessment, so you may be performing the same assessment multiple times. So I have the ability to compare one instance of the assessment to another. So you'll notice in my actions drop-down button, I have the option to compare. So when I select compare, it's going to take me to this new screen where I can select the assessment that I want to compare it to. So I've selected the most recent version. And now if I want to look back to the assessment that was completed in January, I can see in a one view side by side, I can see which answers have how they have changed over time. So you'll notice some of the answers have the orange bar over here. If my answer was different, it will be highlighted and that will be denoted by the orange bar. Now I also have the ability to check this box to show only those different answers. So it's going to hide the answers that were the same. So depending on how I want to look at it, I can uncheck or check this box. I can also select a different assessment if I wanted to compare it. Whoops, excuse me. If I wanted to compare it to a different assessment. So I can select the one in February. And again, I can at a glance go through and see how my answers have changed over time. And I can show only different answers, or I can show all answers. And then selecting back from here is going to take me back to my default assessment view. And then the white button, back button over here, is going to take me back to my default care plan summary view. So that is the care management new functionality. So do we have questions from any of our attendees? Can you still move the overdue outreach to another day? Sure. So let's go back to our outreach assistant. And so I think the question is, and let me go ahead and, so I don't have any overdue outreaches. I'm going to go to a different patient because I know I have overdue outreaches for another patient. Yes, you do have the ability to do that. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. Okay. Okay, so this patient has a couple overdue outreaches. So I can see this intervention was due on 5/2. There's a few of them that were due on 5/2. So I have the ability to change the date if I want to do that from my care plan. If I click my task edit button, I can select a different date here. So I can just select a different date on my calendar and I can save that. And then it's going to update my due date for that planned outreach. Now, also for me, I like the feature of the calendar. This to me is a much easier way to do that. So here are a couple of overdue outreaches. In this way, I can just quickly drag this to another day. So for example, if I wanted to move this till tomorrow, I can just grab that object and I can move it to another date. So those two options would allow me to reschedule a planned outreach that may be currently overdue. Can you print the compare assessments? That feature is not available yet. We do have the ability to print the actual assessment. So when you go to the assessment page, this printer icon would print the actual assessment, but not from the assessment compare. So good question. So let's just see. Let's just for, okay, so here we do have two instances. So for example, if I wanted to compare this to the previous assessment, I do have the ability to view those answers. But when I go to print, you can see it's only going to print my, my current version of that assessment. So view only for now. Any other questions? And I'm going to go ahead and I think we'll go ahead and unmute everybody. So if you're not able to enter your question, we'll open up the line and are we unmuted? Hi there. Sorry, we're trying to figure out. I believe that each user should have the ability to unmute themselves. When everybody joins the call, they're muted by default. But if you look in your GoToWebinar control panel, you should be able to click the unmute button next to your name. So hopefully, if anybody has a question that they want to ask live, they can do that. Or you can raise your hand as well, and we can unmute you from our side. Hey, Amy, I think you're unmuted now.
Thank you, guys. One quick question, Katie. When you were in the outreach history portion, and you had several of your outreaches expanded, what if you're on, say, an outreach and you complete, one task from that first outreach and then two from another outreach, but you still have open tasks within outreach? When you actually hit perform, is it end dating that entire outreach, or is it only ending the task that you selected and keeping that outreach on your calendar?
Yep, good question. So here's the example where I have several tasks for an outreach that's planned for today. If I select just one of them, when I perform, it's only going to include that one task. And then I'm just going to quickly just add some details here. And then when I submit, when I go back to my planned outreach, I still have my planned outreaches. So you can do it in bulk or you can do it individually, and it does keep the remainder of those tasks as they were. And then you can see that I have performed that single one, and that one moves down to the performed outreaches.
Okay, and it's similar. So if you do an outreach and the patient is not contacted, it would still show up as a performed outreach in that section, but it would also remain in your planned outreaches, or would you have to plan another?
You would have to plan. Yeah. So in that case, what I would probably do is I would perform an outreach, and at the very same time, I would plan another outreach. So I could document that I was not able to contact them, but I don't want them to fall off my list. So I'm going to go ahead and plan at the very same time for next week, or whatever. I could even plan it for tomorrow, that I want to follow up with this patient, even though I was not able to contact them today.
Okay, excellent.
And
Thank you.
now, yeah, so those outreaches were performed, and then now these outreaches are planned for tomorrow.
Got it. Thanks very much.
You're
That was
welcome.
helpful.
Anyone else? I don't see any other hands. And I know we've gone a few minutes over, but and I apologize for that, but I really, really thank you all for your attendance. And you can expect that we will follow up with an email. We have some user guides for all of these new features. And as well, we are going to provide a recording of the webinar so you can share that with others within your organization that may not have been able to attend today. Also, we have another one planned for tomorrow. If anybody wants to attend live, that was in the original invitation, the ability to register for both days. So pass that on if any of your colleagues were not able to attend today. And again, thank you so much for your participation. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.